Hello students, I am Dr. Pooja Mehta from Inder Kumar Gujral, Punjab Technical University, Kapurthala, Punjab. It is very strange that in this dynamic world, every day we are bombarded with countless objects, events or persons, but we retain few stimuli and reject others. In addition to that, the way we understand and interpret the stimuli received differs from person to person. The answer to this question is perception. Perception is a psychological factor affecting human behavior because perception determines the way the individual experiences the situation. Perception can be understood as the process through which information or stimulus is received from the environment, then selected, organized, and interpreted in order to assign some meaning to it. The meaning is derived out of the information received from the environment so that information can be used for taking important decisions and actions. Now we will discuss definitions of perception. According to Joseph Reitz, perception includes all those processes by which an individual receives information about his environment. These sub-processes are seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, and smelling. The study of these perceptual processes shows that their functioning is affected by three classes of variables. These three classes of variables are the objects, events being perceived, or the environment in which the perception occurs, and the individual doing the perceiving. Another way of defining the perception is it can be defined as a process by which individuals organize and interpret their sensory impressions in order to give meaning to their environment. Now we will discuss importance of perception. Importance of perception can be understood from the following points. Perception is an important phenomena in understanding variations in individual behavior. Every individual perceives the surroundings differently, and therefore understanding the perception helps us find out why every individual behaves in a particular manner. This is one of the major reasons why one individual finds one job interesting and satisfying while the another individual finds the same job boring and dissatisfying. As perception strongly influences behavior of an individual, we can very easily predict the behavior of that individual in the changed circumstances by understanding his perception about the present environment. Another importance of perception can be deduced by the fact that perception can also help us in assessing various needs of the people because their perception is largely influenced by their needs. Students, now we are going to discuss perceptual process. Perceptual process is the process of perception which involves various sub-processes: receiving, selecting, organizing, interpreting, checking, and reacting to the stimuli received are the sub-processes which are involved in the perceptual process. This process is influenced by the perceiver, the object, and the situation. Now we are going to discuss perceptual process. From the definitions we discussed earlier, it is very clear that process of perception is composed of various sub-processes. These sub-processes are given in the diagram. We can see that the first sub-process of the perceptual process is receiving, which means to receive the information the data in the form of stimulus from the environment. The second perceptual process is selecting. Selecting means to keep the relevant information and discard the irrelevant information. The third sub-process of the process of perception is organizing. Organizing means to arrange the data into a particular fashion so as to give meaning to that information. Third sub-process of this process is interpreting. Interpreting means to assign some meaning to the information. Interpreting is followed by the fifth step of perceptual process, which is called checking the information. Checking the information means whether the information which we have received from the environment is right or wrong. And the last sub-process of perceptual process is called reacting. Reacting means acting upon the information which we have received from the environment. Receiving is the first step of the perceptual process. We all know that human body is comprised of 5 sensory organs. Can we name them? Yes. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. These sensory organs help in sensing the environment in the form of vision, hearing, smell, touch, and taste. The sensory organs receive the stimuli from the outer environment. Anything which we notice in the environment is a stimulus. For example, noise of vehicles, smell of food, sound of rain, sense of heat, sense of cold, etc. The stimuli which we receive serve as inputs for the process of perception. Second step of the perceptual process is selecting. The sub-process selecting means to select the information which we receive from the environment as stimulus. Many things happen in the environment around us simultaneously and parallelly, but human mind cannot pay equal attention to all the events, all the activities, or everything equally. Therefore, individuals filter or screen out the irrelevant things and select the things which are relevant with their existing beliefs, values, and needs. This process of selecting relevant things, relevant activities from the environment for paying the attention is called perceptual selectivity. There are number of factors which influence the process of selecting stimuli from the environment. These factors can be categorized as external factors or internal factors. External factors are those factors which are prevailing in the external environment. These factors are size of the object being perceived, intensity of the activity being perceived, repetition of the activity or event being perceived, contrasting effect, the things in motion, which we can say is the movement, novelty and familiarity with the object, and nature of the object. Second category is internal factors. Internal factors are those factors which are based on the individual himself or herself. These factors are learning, needs, age, and interest. Now we will discuss the factors in detail. First external factor affecting the process of selection is size. It is well known fact that size always catches the attention of an individual. Generally, bigger objects are more likely to catch attention than the smaller ones. For example, a very big animal in a zoo will always catch more attention of the visitors than the smaller one. In addition to this, we can also see that a big page or a full page advertisement in a newspaper always stands out than a small column advertisement. Second factor affecting the selecting process is intensity. The stimuli which we receive from the environment having high intensity are more likely to be perceived than the stimuli with the low intensity. For example, very bright colors, very bright lights, loud noise, strong odor are noticed faster than light colors, dim lights, soft sounds, and weak odors. Next external factor is repetition. It is also well known that repeated stimuli draw more attention than those which are not repeated. When instructions given by a plant supervisor are repeated again and again, those instructions are more likely to be retained in the memory of employees for a longer period of time than those instructions which are conveyed only once. For example, an advertisement which is repeated more on a TV channel or radio stations catches attention of the viewers and is remembered by them than the advertisements which are shown just once a day. The next external factor is contrast. Principle of contrast means that stimuli which stand out against the background or objects which are in contrast with their surroundings will receive more attention. For example, an exit signboard in a movie hall, a danger signboard on a road under construction, they are made with a color scheme which is contrasting to each other. For example, red color is used in combination with the black color, yellow color is again used in combination with the black color, or a combination of white and black color is also used to make the things contrast with the background. Movement. The principle of motion states that a moving object or thing draws more attention than a still object. A moving vehicle among the parked vehicles will catch the attention immediately. This principle clarifies that the objects in motion are more likely to catch the attention of the viewers than the objects which are still. The next external factor is novelty and familiarity. This principle states that novel objects or familiar objects always gain more attention of a perceiver. For example, in a crowded trade, a friend, a relative with a familiar face will catch attention more easily than the person who is not familiar to us. Similarly, the principle of novelty states that novel or new things catch more attention than the familiar things. For example, a new face in a family get together will be immediately noticed by us rather than the everybody who is known to us. The next external factor is Nature. Nature refers to whether the object is visual in nature or auditory in nature. It is a common fact that pictures receive better attention than words, videos, and attracts more attention than the still pictures. A rhyming phrase attracts more attention than a phrase which is presented as just a narration. Another example is animated cartoons catch more attention of children than merely comic books. After discussing external factors of perception, now we will discuss internal factors affecting the process of selection. These internal factors are learning, needs, age, and interest. First internal factor we are going to discuss is learning. Learning is a cognitive factor which strongly influences the process of perception. Learning creates expectancy in the individuals, and then they tend to perceive what they want to perceive. Second factor is needs. Needs also play a significant role in the process of perceptual selectivity. A thirsty person will always be very sensitive towards the sources of water, and a hungry person will always tend to see eating points everywhere. This means that a person who has high need for affiliation will always join the group of his friends in the leisure time. But the person with high need for achievement will tend to work hard even in the leisure time to accomplish his goals. This means that need is the basic factor which drives the entire process of perception. Whatever we perceive from the environment is always based upon our unsatisfied need. Next internal factor is age. This principle defines that the people of different age group always hold different perceptions about the environment. For example, senior executives always feel that young executives are not very competitive to take important decisions of the organizations. On the other hand, young staff always complain that senior executives are resistant to change and they tend to follow very conventional or traditional methods of working in the organization. These differences in the perceptions of old and young employees are due to the difference in their age. The next internal factor is interest. Perception is also influenced by the interest of the perceiver. A fashion designer will notice so many details in an outfit which is just hanged over on a statue of a shop. The fashion designer will notice even a minute detail of the outfit in just a casual look. But a routine visitor will not be able to observe the same details in the same outfit, even if he looks that outfit 10 times more, which means that perception is also derived by the interest of the perceiver. Next sub-process of the perceptual process is organizing. After receiving and selecting the stimuli from the environment, the received information must be organized in a particular fashion so that we can extract some meaning out of it. This aspect of organizing the information into a meaningful whole is called perceptual organization. Perceptual organization is completely a cognitive process and is based on few principles. The first principle of organizing is figure and ground. This principle is considered as the basic form of organizing the perceptual set. This principle states that the object or event or a person which is being perceived stands out from its background. The principle of figure and ground can be well explained with the help of this figure. Dear student, please look at the figure very carefully. What do you see here? In the first sight, this figure looks like a white vase. But if you take white as a background, then you will see two faces which are in black color. Therefore, we can easily conclude that whatever we perceive from the environment is based on the principle of figure and ground, which means objects, they stand out from their background very distinctively. Perceptual grouping. Perceptual grouping is defined as the tendency to group the stimuli into some meaningful patterns. Grouping includes four sub-principles, which are similarity, proximity, closure, and continuity. First principle is similarity. This principle states that objects of similar shape or similar color or similar size tend to be perceived as one group. For example, in an organization, all white-collared employees are seen as one group, all blue-collared employees will be seen as another group. Second principle of perceptual grouping is called principle of proximity. The principle of proximity states that individuals tend to perceive the objects placed together as one group. For example, the employees who are working in the same department or the employees who are working in the same team, they are perceived as one group because of their geographical nearness or geographical closeness. The next principle of perceptual grouping is called closure. The principle of closure states the tendency of human beings to perceive the object as a whole, even when some parts of it are missing. Individuals' perceptual process will fill the gaps that are unfilled from the sensory input. Dear students, please see the object given here. What do you perceive it as? This object will be perceived as a circle, even if some parts are missing. Just like this, in an organization also, a sincere, hardworking, and honest worker will be perceived as a good performer by the managers, even if he behaves in a contradictory manner sometimes. The next principle of perceptual grouping is principle of continuity. Principle of continuity assumes that an individual tends to perceive continuous lines or pattern. People tend to perceive the obvious ways of performing the tasks and fail to think creativity. Therefore, we can say continuity leads to inflexibility and non-creative thinking on the part of employees. The next principle of perceptual organizing is perceptual constancy. The principle of constancy states the tendency of human beings to perceive certain characteristics of an object as remaining constant, despite of various variations in the stimuli. This principle provides a sense of stability in this dynamic world. There are several aspects of constancy. We will discuss them one by one. First aspect is shape constancy. Shape constancy means when an object appears to maintain its shape despite of marked changes. The second aspect of constancy is size constancy. Size constancy is when we tend to see the object unchanged in size even if it moves farther away from us. For example, a player who is standing on the other side of the football ground will not perceive the football smaller as compared to when he looks at the same football from a closer location. Perceptual defense. This principle states that individuals tend to build a defense against the stimuli which we are conflicting, threatening, or unacceptable. Defense may assume the four possible forms: the outright denial, modification of data received, change in the perception but refusal to change, and lastly, change in the perception itself. The next stage of perceptual process is interpreting. Perceptual interpretation is the essential part of the perceptual process. After the selection and organization of the information, perceiver interprets the information in order to assign some meaning to it. Actually, perception is said to be formed only when the information is interpreted. Several factors contribute in the interpretation of the information. The first factor which contribute in the interpretation of the information is perceptual set. Perceptual set explains that previously held beliefs or experiences about an object influence the individual's perception about similar objects. This phenomena is called perceptual set. For example, an old manager may have developed a general belief that young executives tend to be frequently absent from the job and they are not committed to the organizations. This previously held belief will always influence his perception whenever he will meet a new young worker. The second factor contributing to the interpretation is stereotyping effect. Stereotyping is the tendency of judging someone on the basis of the group to which that person belongs. An individual's perception about one person will always be influenced by his experiences with the other members of the group to which that person belongs. Some common examples of stereotyping are: Americans are usually perceived as materialistic. Japanese are usually perceived as nationalistic. Workers are usually perceived by the management as anti-management. The third factor contributing the interpretation is halo effect. Halo effect is the tendency of perceiving others on the basis of a single trait which may be good or bad, favorable or unfavorable. Sometimes we judge the person on the basis of one single impression. For example, a person who is just kind may also be perceived as good, able, helpful, etc. And the person who is rude once can be perceived as very awful, aggressive, unkind, or harmful, etc. Halo effect is a common error committed by the managers while evaluating their subordinates. The next factor is projection. Projection is the tendency of assigning own attributes to the persons we are going to perceive. It is very easy to judge others if we assume that they are like us. Projection refers to projecting own feelings, abilities, motives, and tendencies while judging others. For example, a manager who himself is punctual will always assume that all the staff members of his office are punctual. The next factor is selective perception. Students, we have already discussed in the starting of this module that individuals have the tendency to select certain objects from the environment which they find relevant to their existing beliefs and values. This is because human mind cannot assimilate everything which it observes, and hence we select certain stimuli and screen out the other. But we don't choose these stimuli randomly. We choose them according to our interests and experiences. Therefore, selective perception always offers the risk of drawing inaccurate picture of the ambiguous situation. The another factor affecting interpretation is implicit personality theory. When we make judgment about others, our perception is influenced by the belief that certain human traits are associated with others. For example, honesty is usually associated with the hardworking trait. Attribution. Attribution refers to the process of assigning causes to the behavior. People are always interested not only in observing the behavior, but also in determining the causes behind it. Their evaluations of and reaction to others' behavior may be heavily influenced by their perception that the others are responsible for their behavior. When we observe an individual's behavior, we attempt to determine whether it is internally caused or externally caused. Internally caused behaviors are those behaviors which we believe that they are under the control of the individual, and externally caused behaviors are those behaviors which we believe that they are beyond the control of the individual. This determination that whether the behavior is internally caused or externally caused depends upon three factors: distinctiveness, consensus, and consistency. Distinctiveness refers to whether the individual displays different behavior in different situations. If the individual usually behaves differently in different situations, his behavior is externally caused. But if he behaves in this similar manner in the different situations, his behavior is internally caused. The next factor is consensus. Consensus is when everyone behaves in the same way whenever they face this similar situation. If there is a consensus in everyone's behavior, it means the behavior is externally caused. Otherwise, it is internally caused. The next is consistency. Consistency in a person's action refers to when an individual behaves in a same way over a period of time. If the behavior of a person is consistent, it is internally caused. Otherwise, it is externally caused. The figure we are going to see now will explain the process of attributing one's behavior to external factors or external factors. Dear students, please look at this figure very carefully. This figure explains the process of attribution. When we observe an individual's behavior, we attempt to determine whether it is internally caused or externally caused. Whether the behavior is internally caused or externally caused, this determination will depend upon the three factors: distinctiveness, consensus, and consistency. Distinctiveness means whether the individual displays different behavior in different situations. If distinctiveness is high, the behavior will be externally caused, which means that If the individual always behaves differently in every situation, his behavior is externally caused. If distinctiveness is low, which means that if the behavior of the person is not different every time, it means that behavior is internally caused. The second factor is consensus. Consensus means everyone behaves in the same way in this similar situation. If the consensus is high, which means that behavior of everyone is same in a particular situation, that behavior will be externally caused. If consensus is low, which means that everyone's behavior is different in the same situation, that behavior will be internally caused. The third factor is consistency. Consistency refers to when an individual behaves in the same way over a period of time. When consistency is high, the behavior will be internally caused. When consistency is low, behavior will be externally caused. After interpreting, the next sub-process of the perceptual process is checking. When the information is received, organized, and interpreted, the perceiver will then check whether his interpretation of the information is right or wrong. After checking, the next sub-process of the perceptual process is reacting. Reacting is the last stage of perceptual process. The process of perception ends up when perceiver is indulged into some action in relation to the perception. The action of perception is also called perceptual output. Perceptual output is basically the outcome of the perceptual process. That outcome may take the form of an attitude, opinions, beliefs, and feelings of perceiver regarding the perceived object or event or a person. The action will always be based on whether the perception is favorable or unfavorable. If the perception is positive or favorable, action will also be favorable. But if the perception is negative, the action followed by the perception will also be unfavorable. Dear students, we have already discussed that the process of perception is influenced by the characteristics of perceiver, a person who is going to form the perception, the perceived, the object about which perception is being made, and the situational factors. These factors will be explained in this module one by one. Firstly, we are going to start the discussion on the characteristics of perceiver. An individual's past experiences, his needs, habits, personality, values, and attitudes influence the perceptual process very significantly. For example, if a manager holds negative beliefs and attitudes towards employee union, he will certainly dislike and express his resentment for even a routine visit of union official in the plant. Now we will discuss characteristics of the situation. The physical, social, and organizational settings of the situation also influence the process of perception. For example, a conversation with the boss held in the reception area of a dance club will be perceived differently than the conversation held in the office with the door closed. Now we are going to discuss characteristics of perceived. Physical attributes, appearance, and behavior of the target also influence how the object is going to be perceived. Physical attributes such as age, gender, height, and weight affects the way the person is being perceived. Perceivers tend to notice physical appearance characteristics that contrast with the norm, that are interest, or that are new or unusual. Physical attractiveness often catches the attention very quickly. Interviewers rate attractive candidates more favorably, and attractive candidates are awarded higher starting salaries. Now we are going to discuss applications of perceptual process in organizational behavior. Dear students, as we have already discussed that perception is actually a cognitive process through which an employee or an individual uniquely interprets the situation based on his needs, experiences, and interests. Perception is the judgment about the reality, not exactly recording of the reality. It reveals the picture of the world, which may or may not different from the reality. Recognizing the difference between perception and reality is very important in the context of organization. Let us now understand the applications of perception in organizational behavior more briefly. The first application of perception in the organizational behavior is in employment interview. In an employment interview, selection or rejection of the candidate depends upon the interviewer's perception about the behavior of the candidate. Sometimes a rejected applicant may deserve the selection, but that applicant is rejected because he is wrongly perceived by the interviewer. The real fact behind this is that the interviewers usually make judgment about the candidates on the basis of early impressions and form inaccurate perceptions. The second application of perception in the organizational behavior is during the process of performance appraisal. Some jobs involve the performance which can be measured in quantifiable terms, such as the job of salesman, production worker, etc. Evaluation of such jobs can be done in an objective manner and hence do not provide the managers with greater discretion. But on the other hand, some jobs involve the performance which cannot be measured in quantifiable terms. Evaluation of such jobs is done in purely subjective manner, and subjective measures of performance provide relatively wider scope for managers to use their own discretions. Therefore, appraisal of such jobs is largely influenced by perception of the evaluator about who is good or who is bad. So students, let us now summarize. Perception can be understood as the process through which information or stimulus is received from the environment, then selected, then organized, and then interpreted in order to assign some meaning to it. Perception is formed when the stimulus received is organized in a particular fashion and then interpreted to have an idea about what is happening in the environment. In addition to that, perception is a subjective process because different individuals may perceive the same environment differently on the basis of what stimulus they select from the environment, the manner they organize it, the manner they interpret the information in order to understand the situation. The process of perception is composed of various sub-processes: receiving, selecting, organizing, interpreting, checking, and reacting to stimuli. These are the 6 sub-processes which are the part of perceptual process. This process is again influenced by the characteristics of perceiver, object, and situation. Thank you.